When discussing Chinese religion and philosophy, the first thoughts anyone has is Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. Very rarely do you hear in-depth analysis of more ancient philosophies like legalism and Mohism, despite them contributing to modern Confucian thought. Sure, legalism is flanderized to be just about following the law or suffer due to having legal in the name. However, when you ask someone about Mohism, they look at you perplexed. These two schools of thought are very parallel to each other in philosophy and upbringing. In this video, I'll be referencing Stanford's Encyclopedia of Philosophy's pages on Mohism and legalism. Along with that, I will be citing the complete works of Han Fei-Tzu, a major philosopher who contributed to legalism. When citing Mohism, however, even though we have access to a majority of the text, a good portion had been lost to time. I'll be primarily citing the Book of Mo, translated by Ian Johnson. One foundational text I'll be using is something that actually documents legalism, Mohism, and other philosophies. Thanks to the goat Sima Qian, he documented over 2,500 years of Chinese history. However, we'll be focusing on his analysis of the various schools of thought during the Warring States period. So, in this video, I'm going to analyze both Mohism and legalism, compare their governing styles, critiques, and how they are now. Let's go! Through Sima Qian's writings, he documented the practice of legalism. Traditionally, it's called Fajia, or the House of Law. However, in the translation I'm using, it's called the Biographies of the Harsh Officials, and it kind of shows. The first person written in it is Zhirdu, a palace attendant who rose in the ranks to governor, where he earned the nickname the Green Hawk. His style of governments implemented hierarchy that his successors would later build on. Zhirdu's influence was so grand that one passage read, "The Xiongnu had long heard of Zhirdu's strict loyalty and integrity, and when he arrived to Yanmen, they withdrew their troops from the borders. As long as Zhirdu was alive, they would not come near the province." The Xiongnu leaders even went so far to fashion a wooden image of Zhirdu, which they ordered their mounted archers to use for target practice, but none of them were able to hit it. Such was the fear that he inspired in them. He was a constant source of worry for the Xiongnu. Later officials like Ning Chen, Zhou Yangyou, and Zhao Yu contributed laws that further enhanced the legalistic mindset, with a law that persecuted anyone who didn't report a crime or harbored a criminal, as well as persecution of bureaucrats whose superiors or inferiors were caught in violation of law. From there, an air of paranoia took root in both civilians and government officials. The legalist mindset is built on strict laws and punishment. One text that fueled this paranoia is found in the complete works of Han Fei-Tzu, chapter 16, The Three Precautions. The texts are seemingly warning signs aimed to assist rulers rather than the common person, pointing out behaviors that people should be wary of. Compared to the other schools of thought, legalism seems to be only stuck in politics. Its emphasis on hierarchy, however, seems to bleed into a religion you might be more familiar about, Confucianism. In chapter 51 of Fei-Tzu, Loyalty and Falpetti, they make it clear that the five relationships, a Confucian concept seen in China today that dictates cognitive and behavioral attitudes towards someone, is held valid in their mindset. Well, it makes light of three of the relationships, getting rid of friends and brothers as essential. This reverence later bled back into Confucian thought. However, we'll get back to it. Mohism, in stark contrast to legalism, is more about compassion and morality, with one of their main tenets being universal love, or jianai. Essentially, Mohists believed in a more equal society, however, not one without hierarchy, but one based on merit. Mohists were generally anti-war, provided for others, and were largely compassionate, along with having the will of heaven as a center point. Well, let me explain heaven real quick. In Chinese philosophy, Tian is the word used to describe Chinese heaven. In the article Ethos in Early Chinese Rhetoric, The Case of Heaven by Yong Kang Wei, he quoted Paul Golden in saying, "Heaven was to the Chinese what God is to Christians in the West." Heaven is essentially the will of the universe, and texts of heaven circulated in order to justify certain societal behaviors. Self-cultivation, in the sense of acting in accordance with one's nature, comes from the notion of heaven, along with the major political tool of the Mandate of Heaven, which legitimized ruling dynasties and tied politics closer to philosophy and religion. Mohists sought to act within heaven's benevolent framework, thus causing a subsequent beef with Confucians. In the Book of Master Mo, chapter 39, Against the Confucians too, Mo-Tzu's opinion on Confucians was, the chapter is called Against Confucians too. He did this one other time, but, it wasn't positive. Mohists saw Confucian rituals and behaviors as antithetical towards the will of heaven, that being benevolence through action. By normalizing their practices, they thought Confucians were essentially leeching off of everyone else. Mozi once said, "They depended on other people's households for food and rely on other people's fields for wine. When a rich man has a funeral, they are very happy indeed, and will say with delight, 'This is a source of clothing and food.'" At the peak of the Warring States period, Mohism, Confucianism, and legalism often argued and had critics towards each other. However, in the end, Confucianism prevailed. So, how did Confucianism outlive its contemporaries? In the modern day, both Mohism and legalism have faded in influence as Confucianism took hold in Chinese culture. The reason why is simple: appeal. Legalism only preserved and benefited the most loyal bureaucrats, whilst Mohism's message of universal love was never really adopted by major elites. Confucianism flourished as a middle ground. It was able to take the aspects of reverence for hierarchy from legalism, whilst taking the strong moral emphasis of heaven from Mohism. However, they did drop the universal love part. With this, their philosophy was accepted by both ruler and subject. Confucianism's ability to adapt aided it when Taoism and Buddhism emerged. Instead of fighting, they accepted both. As said before, it had the ability to adapt. Taoism's ideas of heaven were incredibly similar to Confucian thought and easy to integrate, whilst Buddhism was so foreign and different that introducing its ideas was pretty easy because it didn't have to compete with anything. This led to the three teachings, a phenomena in Chinese religion where the three coexisted and actually aided each other. Essentially, they all added on top of each other's doctrine. Taoism expanded heaven and self-cultivation, whilst Buddhism added in a karmic system, along with the larger meaning of life through the Four Noble Truths. Basically, any other school of thought was either integrated into it or into Buddhism or Taoism. Another contributing factor would be how easy it is to integrate into society as a whole. All Confucianism asks is to follow the virtuous path, with virtue being responsible, kind, and hardworking. Anyone from a lord to a peasant could strive towards Confucianism. This in turn created a culture of shame, where if you weren't following the virtuous path, what were you doing? Thus, Confucianism became socially the norm. Along with that, Confucianism tied itself to Chinese culture, with the hierarchy of the five great relationships, that being ruler to subject, husband to wife, friend to friend, brother to brother, and son to father. With these five relationships, as seen before in the legalist system, there were hierarchies of respect. Along with this, it paved the way for something called mianzi and guanxi. Mianzi, translating to face, is essentially how people perceive you. If you do anything bad, then your face is discredited and people might not trust you. With guanxi, that being connection, this is how you connect to everyone else, be it your boss or a relative. Guanxi is essentially networking. With these two combined, along with the social norms presented in Confucianism, you have a system where calling in favors and hierarchy over others was incentivized and often rewarded. Because if you helped someone build up their mianzi, they would in turn, or expectedly, help you out when building yours. Finally, the main thing that caused Confucianism to overtake the other two religions was strangely its ability of self-expression. It wouldn't be hard to think that a legalist might put restrictions on self-expression. However, could you believe Mohists are against music? In the same chapter that Mozi criticized Confucius, he states that music is a waste of funds that could have gone to support people in need. Thus, the rituals of Confucianism were able to boost people around and help them get through life. In the end, Mohism and legalism have faded from influence today. However, they are still mentioned in pop culture and YouTube videos like this. If you enjoyed what you're watching, please like and subscribe and comment down below. And yeah, I'll see you later.